Hello, everyone. I'm Ian McGavin, the Marketing Project Manager with BeMoved Media. I'd like to welcome you to this session. Please remember that the session is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand following the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, please add them to the Q&A section to the right of your screen. Please note that your questions are sent privately. With that, I'd like to welcome Alastair Hayfield from Interact Analysis, who will be speaking on how electrification will revolutionize the future of commercial vehicles. Take it away, Alastair.
Thanks, Ian, and hopefully everybody can hear me this time. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be. I'm delighted that you're able to join my session today. I'm really excited to be able to share with you some of the insights and findings from our research and talk a little bit about how we see the commercial vehicle market developing in the future and why we think electrification will revolutionize the industry. So without further ado, I'm going to share my presentation and we can get stuck in. Please do, if you have questions, make sure that you add those to the Q&A. I'd be delighted to try and address those once I finish my presentation. So I'm Alastair Hayfield. I'm a senior research director with Interact Analysis. We're a global market research and consultancy company, and we focus on commercial vehicles, so both on-road and off-road vehicles, warehouse automation and robotics, and industrial automation equipment. So I guess the place I would like to start is what's the kind of problem that we're trying to solve for here, and I guess really it's the kind of the greenhouse gas emissions and the pollution that's created by heavy duty vehicles and commercial vehicles. Even though they represent a relatively small number of vehicles on the road, they're responsible for an oversized share of CO2 emissions. So they're kind of contributing fairly substantially to global warming. And the additional problem is that emissions from heavy duty vehicles and other commercial vehicles have actually been increasing since 2000, and that's not because the vehicles themselves are actually getting less efficient. If anything, they've got more efficient, and they've had to adapt to new kind of emission standards. But basically, as a society, we're consuming more stuff, we're making more things, and all of those products need to be moved around. And so, despite all of those kind of efficiency gains and measures to combat tailpipe emissions, the problem is getting worse, basically. And it's not just greenhouse gases. There's also particulate pollution, so nitrous oxides, and there's growing awareness from people, particularly living in cities, that air quality is a real problem. It leads to a lot of health issues. A lot of early deaths can be kind of attributed to it, and really we need to do something to kind of fix the issues around greenhouse gas emissions and also pollution. I guess one of the questions I get asked, particularly by people who maybe don't know much about the commercial vehicle market, is, aren't commercial vehicles hard to electrify? They kind of think of a big bus, or they think of a big truck, and they kind of say, well, there's no way you could electrify that because, I think about a passenger car, and I worry about range and how often I would have to charge it. There's no way that that's something that can be achieved with a commercial vehicle. And in all honesty, when I started researching this market 6 or 7 years ago, I probably had the same attitude. You could look at the industry back then, and there weren't very many electric commercial vehicles, and really there was a kind of sense in the industry that it was hard to do. It might not happen very quickly, but it's a very, very different story. And as we kind of sit here in 2023, there are now very clear directions from most truck manufacturers, from most suppliers, and critically, targets coming from governments and cities about phasing out polluting commercial vehicles and really kind of setting some aggressive targets for their adoption. So I think we'll kind of see in my presentation today that commercial vehicles, they might be hard to electrify, but actually it's possible, and some pretty exciting things are going to happen in the market. So maybe just to kind of put some of this in context, last year, about one in every 1,500 heavy-duty long-haul trucks sold in Europe was battery electric, which I think we can all agree is a pretty small number. But just to kind of give you a scale of how things will change, by 2030, 1 in every 4 heavy-duty long-haul trucks sold in Europe will be battery electric. So we're in the space of 8 years, we're going from basically nothing, to a quarter of every truck that's being sold being battery electric in Europe, and that's going to create some really fantastic opportunities throughout the supply chain and really kind of revolutionize how fleets and OEMs think about the products that they're designing and that they're using. It doesn't just stop there in Europe, though. Of the heavy duty trucks that are being sold in 2022, something like half were sold in China. China has really been very aggressive in its development of an electrified commercial vehicle market. And we sort of expect it to, kind of continue that leadership over the next 5 to 10 years. Some of that, or possibly you could argue that all of that really kind of stems from what China did with its bus market. And historically, China was at the point where it was selling tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of battery electric buses every year. It's been a little bit slower recently because of COVID, but in the long term, it's going to get back to that point. And a lot of that development and expertise that went into developing battery electric buses has kind of spilled over into other commercial vehicles. And, we're seeing Chinese OEMs, Chinese suppliers really developing a lot of kind of experience and competence in that market. Following on from China, we're expecting around about half of buses sold in Europe will be battery electric in 2030. And after that, going out to 2040, that's rapidly going to go up. And we would sort of expect almost every bus by 2040 sold in Europe will be battery electric or fuel cell, will not be a diesel model anymore. So maybe to kind of put this into wider context and kind of just sort of start talking about the kind of opportunity here and how things will change. So there's something like depending on the year, something like sort of 19 or 20 million commercial vehicles sold globally every year. A fairly large proportion of those are light duty trucks, so things like pickup trucks or vans used for kind of short delivery or for tradespeople. But there are a significant number, several million kind of medium and heavy duty trucks sold every year, and there's about 500,000 buses sold every year globally, and of that number, a lot are used in cities where particularly air pollution is a big concern. So it's a fairly large number of vehicles being sold annually, and there's a lot of ground to be kind of covered to electrify those. But it's gonna happen quickly. So particularly in the light duty segment, a lot of those vehicles are borrowing technology from the passenger car market, and really from a total cost of ownership perspective, it already makes sense for light duty trucks, delivery vehicles to go electric, particularly in cities, and we would expect by 2030 a fairly substantial penetration rate there of battery electric vehicles. It's going to take a little longer for medium duty and heavy duty trucks, because TCO is going to take a little bit longer. These are more expensive. It's going to take a little bit longer for operators to get return and feel kind of comfortable using them, but it will happen. And then for buses, that's going to happen pretty quickly as well. We already see a lot of municipalities really wanting to take the kind of position that the vehicles that they use won't be polluting, and they can do something to try and combat emissions in their cities or in their towns. So in terms of where the kind of competition between different powertrain technologies sits, we would really see that the main competition is battery electric versus diesel. We don't see much opportunity for fuel cell overall. We can talk a little bit more about that, but really the big kind of technology transition that's happening here, and how the industry has been revolutionized, is to kind of switch from diesel vehicles over to battery electric vehicles. And by mid 2030s, there'll be a tipping point. More of the market will be battery electric than diesel, and then going out to 2040, in most regions, China, Europe, North America, would be 90 to 100% of new vehicles being sold being battery electric, and even in maybe some more emerging markets, Latin America, India, it could be kind of 70% or higher by that point. Buses have really kind of shown the way when it comes to electrification of commercial vehicles, but they're unlikely to kind of have that lead for much longer. And in fact, we kind of forecast a pretty rapid uptake of battery electric medium heavy duty trucks from kind of this year onwards, because in a lot of use cases, the total cost of ownership is already there to move to battery electric, and we're seeing a lot of funding being made available in certain regions, and we're also seeing a lot of kind of policy support that's driving the market towards this type of solution. So it's fair to say that electric buses have kind of shown the way, but trucks are really going to be the kind of future of electrified commercial vehicles. One of the other kind of questions that we get quite often about our research is what will happen, particularly in the long haul market, long haul trucks, between battery electric and fuel cell. There is a debate in the industry at the moment about whether fuel cells are a better fit for the heavy duty or really intense duty cycles, or where real long range is required. And in reality, we think that both technologies will be used and can kind of be complementary. Possibly battery electric will win out over the long run, but we definitely see a market for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, particularly in a long haul sector, because there are going to be applications where range is an issue, temperature performance is an issue, or the vehicle has a really intense duty cycle, and a battery electric system just isn't the best option for it. So we very clearly see a future for both technologies. But again, it's really exciting to see, how they will come into play and how different OEMs, different suppliers will kind of approach those technologies. So I thought it might be helpful as I was presenting today to actually kind of try and put a number to this opportunity, right? I think it's very easy to sit here and say, we think that X thousand or X million vehicles will be battery electric or will be hydrogen fuel cell by 2030. But what does that actually mean in terms of kind of spend, and what is the opportunity for suppliers? Well, really, it's a pretty major opportunity, and I'll sort of break this down into some of the different categories. But if we just look at kind of North America or Europe, this is going to be a multi-billion, $100 billion, $200 billion opportunity in the relative near term for supplies to this market for batteries, motors, inverters, fuel cell systems. And, we don't see any sign of that kind of slowing down beyond 2030. If anything, the revenue opportunity could accelerate after 2030 as more and more vehicles are electrified. And that kind of transition and that kind of opportunity is going to kind of shake up the supply chain. We are going to see new companies who can supply batteries or different products, become successful. And we would expect to see some changes in who the companies are that are active in this market. To put a bit of context to where the revenue opportunity is, so we look at kind of all of the different kind of components that go into electrified powertrains. So the batteries, the motors, inverters, chargers, and then also kind of fuel cell tank and transmissions. Clearly the big opportunity is around batteries. The batteries that go into commercial vehicles are large, and because of the performance requirements, they tend to be a little bit higher value than what might be used in passenger cars. So somewhere between about 40 and 50% of the value of powertrain revenue is going to come from batteries. But after that, there's a fairly substantial opportunity for motors and inverters, and even things like onboard chargers. Are going to be a multi-billion-dollar opportunity in the long run. So really, there is a I keep saying this, but there really is going to be a kind of revolution in where revenue is, and who is getting access to some of this kind of new technology and new opportunities. APAC, obviously is going to be a big driver of growth as well. China is doing a lot when it comes to electrified vehicles. So APAC alone is going to be worth something like $70 billion annually in terms of electrified powertrain revenue. Again, most of that coming from batteries, but things like motors and inverters, again, contributing fairly significantly to that opportunity in the long run. And maybe one of the kind of last points that I want to focus on today is the kind of commercial or the kind of competitive landscape. I think one of the things that's not particularly well understood, maybe outside of this industry, is just how dominant the Chinese manufacturers have been in the last 5 to 10 years, particularly when it comes to commercial vehicles. And part of that's been driven by just the size and the scale of the Chinese market. Many orders of magnitude bigger than the US or what's happening in individual European countries. But to kind of just highlight how stark this is. For the top 10 medium and heavy duty truck manufacturers last year, 9 of the top 10 were Chinese. The only non-Chinese vendor in there was Volvo. And in reality, that top 10 is not going to change anytime soon. We might expect to see some of the other European or US brands get on there, but it's clearly going to be dominated by the Chinese. And the other thing that we kind of expect to see is those OEMs look to grow outside of China as well. At the moment, 90% plus, if not more, 100% of their sales are currently in the domestic Chinese market, but they are very aggressively targeting sales into Europe, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and they really will kind of continue to dominate the market. That's not to say that we won't see strong growth for European truck OEMs or US truck OEMs, and of course there are a lot of kind of startups in this market as well. Companies like Volta and Teva, to name just two, who 5 years ago didn't exist, and so that's another big change that's happening in the market, is that there are a number of new companies entering and offering suppliers new opportunities, and kind of new growth levers. So hopefully that's been a good introduction to how we kind of see electrification revolutionizing commercial vehicles. Hopefully there's some kind of good questions. I'm gonna kind of pause at this point and thank everybody for their attention. If you want to ask me any other questions, I've got my contact details here, and feel free to visit our website and take a look at some of our kind of free to download content. But yeah, I'll open it up to questions now. So thanks everybody.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Alastair. We have a few questions in the chat. I'll just read them off one by one. What will accelerate adoption of electric trucks beyond what you're forecasting?
In some instances, there's already a TCO advantage for electric trucks. Operators just benefit financially by making the switch. There's not much that can be done to kind of accelerate the market in some regards. I think better incentives and funding will help, and in markets where that's happened, so California is a good example of that they've been able to kind of accelerate adoption of these vehicles. Availability of charging is an issue. So it's clear in certain markets that overnight charging at a hub, at a depot for these vehicles is practical, and that's good enough to kind of meet the requirements, certainly for the first generation of these fleets. But better kind of en route charging and rapid charging for these vehicles is going to be necessary in certain markets, and it would be good to see more development there. And I think if that was something that was funded or kind of heavily mandated for, then that could be something that would drive faster adoption.
Okay, great. What are going to be some of the roadblocks now and in 10 years?
So roadblocks now, we still have supply chain issues. That is a fundamental problem at the moment. We are seeing some easing, and we're sort of seeing prices for certain components kind of start to normalize a little bit. But in the short term, that is a bit of a roadblock. Availability of these vehicles and components for them. Also, in some countries, a lack of direction around, is there going to be an outright ban for these, diesel vehicles? When is that going to be? Is it going to be 2030, 2035? How quickly do fleets and manufacturers need to respond to this? And then in 10 years, robots in 10 years, I guess maybe in 10 years, how well has the market executed on its plan, right? Is it going to be the case that manufacturers who said that they're going to sell 30% of their volume as being battery electric by 2030, is that going to have come true? And if not, what are they going to do to kind of accelerate and meet that? So in 10 years, maybe it's going to be a case of, how do they accelerate on their position, or how do they kind of catch up versus where they said they were going to be?
What else can be done to curb emissions?
So, I think if you took my presentation today at face value, you'd sort of think that the silver bullet here is to just make all the trucks electric, and that's going to kind of solve all the problems. And it's a very simplistic view. I think that fleets can do a lot to improve fuel economy, and that applies to both diesel and battery electric trucks. I seem to recall reading somewhere that there is a sort of 20 to 25% difference in fuel economy between the best driver in a fleet and the worst driver. So driver training can be a really good way to reduce emissions and improve economy. Better route planning and load planning can be another way to do that. And then there are lots of other technologies that can be deployed on trucks, tire pressure monitoring, better aerodynamics, things like that, that can all kind of help to improve fuel economy or improve range. So there are things that can be done that are actually quite simple and don't necessarily require that every single truck is made to be battery electric. There are ways to curb emissions that have nothing to do with electrification.
Perfect. And that feeds into our next question. What are the software tied to vehicle electrification? What are the main new categories of software that are emerging, like energy management or charging management? And who are the main vendors / interesting up and rising vendors?
I maybe couldn't talk too much about who the vendors would be. I mean, so one of the key pieces of software, and just have to kind of look to Tesla for this, but would be over-the-air updates, basically, and being able to get data off the vehicle, right? So it's going to be critical that battery electric vehicles can be updated remotely, and particularly as they are commercial assets, being able to get information off of them about where they are, what goods they're carrying, state of battery charge, if it's pulling a refrigerated trailer, what temperature is it at, how is that impacting battery performance, all of that's going to be critical. So having good software around over-the-air updates and communicating with the vehicle is going to be key. And then, there will need to be tighter software integration around things like load planning and route planning, when it's best to charge, right, in that route schedule. And, can these trucks with very large batteries play a part in kind of grid balancing as well? So there are clearly a lot of new software requirements. I mean, I probably could think of some companies, none kind of come to mind at the moment, but in terms of kind of main software, yes, there will need to be developments around OTA and sort of route planning and how that fits in with charging.
Okay. Last question, unless there's another one. Are there any trucks that would transition to hybrid before going to total electric?
Yeah, so we do forecast that there will be some hybrid trucks, particularly in kind of medium duty applications. We're not very bullish on it. You know, we're not expecting kind of tens of thousands of units per year. I think it does tend to add a lot of cost to a vehicle for not too much gain in terms of efficiency or emission reduction. And because we're already starting to see, you know, in certain countries, in certain applications, a fairly substantial positive TCO for battery electric, we just kind of think that the market will go in that direction. So, you know, we don't see much demand for hybrids. And in fact, you can kind of see that as you look at, you know, the models that major OEMs are introducing. There hasn't been that, you know, big push or announcement of hybrid models. So we will see some, but we don't expect to see, you know, a huge number of hybrid trucks.
Okay, perfect. That's it. Thank you, Alastair, and thank you everyone for attending this session. You can join your next session from the lobby, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks everybody again. Thank you.